Okay, good morning, everybody. Welcome to this month's parental webinar. We have an amazing topic, which I know is close to everybody's hearts, which is how to cope with stress. We are all stressed and trying to juggle so many different balls with our own lives, our staff, supporting, being mentors for our people working within our settings. So we thought this is a really good topic to bring to everybody, to get a really good expert, which Gail, my colleague, will introduce in a minute, to deliver this webinar for us today and give everybody an opportunity to really ask key questions of potentially constraints that you might have within your setting. So that you can ask that into the chat box during the webinar, and we will ask that for our guest speaker today. Just one couple of housekeeping rules. If you can please just keep yourselves on mute during the webinar. There might be an opportunity at the end where you can unmute yourself and ask questions. Just to let you know that the recording will be sent out to everybody who's registered for the webinar, and all the slides and everything will be shared as well. Thank you so much. I will now hand over to my colleague Gail James, who will introduce our fantastic guest speaker today. Thank you, and thank you everybody for joining us today as well.
Thanks, Adele. We're so fortunate today to have early years educator and coach Pam McFarlane with us. She's going to explore so much about stress today, what we mean by the term stress, how we can identify our own stress triggers and inducers, how we can help ourselves and our colleagues break down these thoughts and regain control when needed we have such busy lives. Pam herself has many years of experience. She was born in Zimbabwe, raised in South Africa, and she settled here in England in 2002. As I said, she's got over 40 years experience, and she has the privilege of teaching children from age 2 to 18. But for the past 14 years, she's been managing early years settings within Brighton and Hove. She's founded her company, Enrich Coaching for Educators. We'll send you the details of that in the email afterwards, offering solutions to businesses to the well-being needs of themselves and their own educators. Her passion is coaching, funnily enough, and training early years educators wherever needed in the world. And she's travelled a lot, from Philippines to Ethiopia. She's climbed Mount Snowdon. She's done Mongolian wrestling. She's had her memoirs published, which are fantastic, which are available on Amazon. So without any further ado, Pam, I'm going to hand over to you.
Oh, wow. Thank you. I don't know if I feel old or just experienced. It's lovely to join in with you guys. Thank you so much. I know this thing for sure, and that is we're in it together. There is nobody that is not coping with stress at the moment. And I think it's well worth a chat. So please send in your questions, your queries, your comments. As I talk, I really want to be as interactive as possible. Want to be able to touch where you're at and see if we can come up with some solutions, some ways to share our stress, and some way that we can just fortify ourselves for the task ahead. So can we have the next slide, please? That sounds very, COVID style, does it? Next slide, please. Thank you. So what is stress? We've got to know what we're talking about. So stress can be defined as any type of change that causes physical, emotional, or psychological strain. Stress is your body's response to anything that requires attention or action. So it is really physical, emotional, and psychological. And everyone experiences stress to some degree, but the way you respond to it, the way you handle it, makes a big difference to your overall well-being. And I think that's a lovely way of describing stress, and that's from the World Health Organization. Thanks, Gail. Now, as we go on, we've got to look at a few things. So this is what we're going to be covering. What is stress? We've seen a definition, but there's also good stress and bad stress, and we've got to make sure that stress works for us instead of against us. We're going to look at identifying our stress triggers and inducers. Self-awareness, how can we help ourselves? And then we can look at some techniques and strategies, breaking things down and regaining control. Language, the use of language is really important. So we're going to look at the use of the term stress and leading by example in our settings. And we're going to look at some useful signposting and where we can provide that for our staff and for ourselves. Thanks, Gail. So, how does stress manifest? Just by way of introduction, I cope with a lot of stress on a daily basis, involving a whole lot of things. So I'm sure I will identify with you at least in one or two areas of stress, and I'll share a little bit more as we go on. But stress can manifest as fear, worry, the inability to relax, increased heart rate, difficulty in breathing, and disturbance in sleeping patterns. Now, I've experienced, I think, all of those in various measures. There's a change in eating patterns, difficulty in concentrating, worsening of pre-existing health conditions, and then also the increased use of alcohol, tobacco, and other drugs. Now, as we go through, I would really like you to look at yourself as a manager, as a practitioner, as an apprentice, and make it really personal. Have a look at everything we say, jot down what is it that affects you, because at the end of the day, we want you to feel better. We want you to be able to know what to do to make your stress better. So make it personal as we go on. So good stress versus bad stress. Now, I hope I pronounce this right. I always call it eustress, and I think that's right. But there's good stress and there's bad stress. And we do need some level of stress in our lives. The good stress can motivate us and focus us energy. It tends to be short term, and we can cope with these kind of stresses. It feels exciting and it improves performance. So, for example, if you go into a running race, there's a heightened stress level because you want to do well and this is the moment. So it feels exciting, your adrenaline's pumping, you do well, and that is good stress. And we can all identify some aspects of good stress in our lives. However, distress, which is bad stress, this is the thing that causes anxiety or concern, can be short or long term. I suppose the long term is much more draining, is perceived as outside of our capabilities, doesn't feel good, feels unpleasant. It decreases our performance rather than enhancing it. And it can lead to mental and physical stress and breakdown, and it can go down a really dark path, actually. Thank you, Gail. So do you recognize any of these? Fears of flying, heights, public speaking, chatting with strangers at a party, social anxieties, repetitive thought patterns can be part of stress. So these can be quite negative. I can't do this. This is not going to happen. This is not going to work. I'm just not up to it. Worrying about future events. With us, it could be Ofsted. It could be a personal thing like waiting for medical test results. It could be, what is your next review going to say? And you're worried about that. Unrealistic perfectionist expectations, thinking you can do it all, thinking we can do everything that is expected of us and do it perfectly. Now, a lot of people are perfectionists, and striving for perfection is brilliant, but if it's unrealistic, it's going to lead to internal distress. So habitual behavior patterns that cause distress include overscheduling, failing to be assertive, procrastination, etc. Now we're going to look at that in a little bit more detail as we go on. Thanks, Gail. So here, this is where I would love you to look at the questions and actually jot down for yourself what it is that you're facing right now. So which stresses am I facing right now? How do these affect my home life? Which stresses affect my work life right now? And also on top of that, what are your top work stresses at the moment? So if we look at work, these are the 4 areas that generally cause stress. So work, feeling pressure at work. How many of you are feeling the pressure of work? I'd love to see your hands. We're going to talk a little bit more about pressure later. Unemployment, retirement. Some people are facing retirement. Some people are facing the prospect of their contracts coming to an end. So there's a whole lot of work stresses that influence our work and our personal lives. Family, relationship difficulties, divorce, caring for someone. Now, obviously I'm feeling pressure at work. I felt that while I was managing. I feel it now in terms of cash flow. There's always that pressure. With families, relationship difficulties is a huge one. And what happens on the outside affects us at work as well. I myself have gone through a divorce, been a single parent. I understand the toll that takes on you as a person, the toll it takes on your work life and on your personal life. We can look at some ways that we can make that better in terms of coping. Caring for someone is also a huge issue. For myself, I don't care for somebody physically day by day, but I know many people do. I have had I care for my child who's now 26, but she's got additional needs, quite complex, but not physical. And that I know is completely draining. I feel for people who care for somebody on an ongoing basis. And some of you might be going through that as well. That affects us, that creates stress. Finance, unexpected bills, who can identify with this? Borrowing money, cost of living crisis, that wonderful phrase, and debt. So from my personal experience, just so that you know, about 10 years ago, I suppose, a bit more actually, when I was a single mother and left with a husband, my husband who died, who left me with a whole lot of bills, was very kind, but I was left with bills and 3 children. So the financial aspect was huge. And during all that time, I was in senior levels at work or managing. And because of the debt, I had to ask somebody to come and help. And I will raise which people helped me a bit later. But I know what it's like to live with debt. I know what it's like to live when you are scared that the postbox is going to rattle. I know what it's like to look at envelopes and say, I can't do it. I can't open it. I can pile them up, but that's all I can do. So all of these things affect each of us at some point or the other. The other thing that we look at is illness, injury, bereavement, and physical health. So obviously a lot of these are physical. We can have an injury that really gives us enormous amount of stress at work and at home. Illness, obviously ongoing illness. Bereavement is a biggie. I've recently written articles for Parenta about losing people that we work with, within our settings. And how do we do that? That creates an enormous amount of stress, obviously, for everybody. Again, in terms of being open, I have suffered a huge amount of bereavement in my life with everybody that is close to me, bar a couple of children. I've lost my son recently, my mother, my father, my last partner, and my first husband to death. Grief is a huge thing that affects your everyday home life, your everyday work life, your dream life, your sleep life, whatever part of life you have. So if anybody wants to chat to me about that in particular, please feel free. But all of these create stress. So I hope you've written down what is impacting you at this moment in time. Thank you, Gail. Next slide, please. Right, so if we look at some basic techniques, now one of these might suit you, 3 of them might suit you. I hope one of them at least will suit you to help. So one thing, and these are all tried and tested, and they're from various sources. Breathing exercises are really good, and that's just to calm your breathing, to focus. All of these things you can look up online as well. Relaxation exercises, another great thing to do. Meditation is a skill that needs to be taught and learned, but you can do that. And you meditate on the good things. You meditate on the positive, and you meditate on the peaceful things, which helps center you. Physical exercise is great. I am no physical specimen, but I have to walk. I have to get out. I have to smell the flowers. I have to hug trees. And that brings me a little bit of peace and sort of closure to some sort of stresses. Mindfulness, that is a whole topic on its own. We can go into that a bit further if you like, but it's about being present in the moment. Being creative, what brings you joy? Go and do it. Even if you don't feel like it, go and do it. Practice gratitude. This is a good one because it means you're focusing on the things that are good, the stresses that are good, and you're leaving the others behind. So I do that all the time. I can say, oh, my daughter is really creating such problems at the moment. I don't know what to do. And I get myself into a state, and then I have to bring myself back and say, I am so grateful I have you. I love you and I care for you, and you bring me so much joy when you're in a good place, and that's what I enjoy. And you're safe at the moment, so thank you. So it brings me back to looking at the positive, and I do that with every area, really. Express your feelings. This is great, this webinar, because we can start expressing our feelings. Adele was talking just before the meeting about how it's such an open platform now. It's an open space for us to speak about how we feel. We don't need to feel embarrassed about it anymore, whereas in years gone by, we couldn't really talk openly. Now we can say, I'm struggling. And people are hearing. Call a support person. Okay, so that could be, obviously in my business, it's a coach. We are there to support people through any kind of stress, trauma, difficulty, problem, or in fact, just development. So call your support person. If that's a coach, fantastic. If it's your mum, fantastic. Just find somebody that you can support. We'll talk a little bit about support within the industry in a moment. And then be in the moment. It's a bit like mindfulness, but right now, be in the moment. And that will really help, actually, to just be in the moment and say, today, right now, I'm fine. All these other things I'm thinking about, I'm worrying about these things. But actually, that's over there right now. And this is what I do. Right now, I've got a roof over my head. I've got things in the fridge. I have got petrol in my car. I've got whatever. So just in the moment, that's what we look at instead of worrying about everything else. Thanks, Gail. So we can look at common stresses in the early years. Right, I love this little graphic here. The expectations that we have for every area of management or leadership. And then there's the reality. And I think, I hope that, well, I don't hope, but I think that a lot of people, for them, that is their reality as well. There's no straightforward path. And in fact, it's just got more and more challenging as we go along, as you know. So these are some of the common stresses, and you can add some of your own as well. Retention, apparently that's getting better, and recruitment. Apparently there's a turnaround, but it's been a horrific 2.5, 3 years of poor retention and the inability to recruit suitable people. Low pay, ongoing. That's never changed in all the time I've been in early years. COVID after effects, we can go into much talking about COVID after effects, including behaviours of children, which is a big thing at the moment that I'm working with other people with. is that the behaviours of children after COVID affect and stress current staff. That goes into behaviours of staff as well, and parents. Too many targets. We are supposed to do this, do that, do this, do that. Unrealistic expectations from Ofsted, from parents, from governing bodies, from owners, from ourselves, and just not enough time in the day. If you have enough time in the day, do tell me how you do it. We've got the same amount of time, but sometimes it is really, really difficult. I've seen a couple of questions pop up, and we can talk about those later. Thank you, Gail. So what can we do? We know what it is. We know it's there. We can break it down and we can regain control to a certain level. Some things we can never control, but let's control what we can. So bearing in mind the things that are affecting you at the moment, what is one thing you can do? That is what we often say as coaches. Yes, you can't fix, for example, we're talking about being in debt and having money envelop you. So, and money is your stress at work and at home. I can open this envelope with the bill inside. I don't have to look at the bill, but I can open the envelope and put it to one side. That may be your first step. I've got to book a date on the diary for something or other, but for an appointment, say a medical appointment, I'm dreading it. I don't want to know what they say. But what you can do is just put a date in. Okay. I am feeling completely low. I don't know if I can take much more in this situation at work, but I can take 5 minutes out. Okay. Or I'm really stressed about what's happening in my room. There's management issues in my room. There's, some behavioral issues. And I feel like I don't have this in control. So you can't do it all, but what you can do is you can maybe speak to your line manager. Okay, so you just look at the one thing you can do. What is your first step? Don't look at the end result. What is your first thing you can do? And then it's all about training your brain a little bit as well, putting it into perspective. So taking a moment to have a look at this thing that is stressing you, that is impacting you. How will this impact me in 5 years' time? Is it that important? Is it extremely urgent? Or can it actually wait an hour, a day, a week? What happens, think about it, what happens if I don't do this thing that's stressing me? Or what happens if I do this? What are your options? There could be more than one option, but look at it, break it down. Think, is this worth the stress? Quite frankly, often it isn't worth the stress. And how will worry help this situation? So we can spend hours worrying and have stomach knots and stress ourselves so badly. But how will this actually help the situation? If it doesn't help the situation, let's look at those other little steps we can do. And also, is this something I have to carry on my own? Again, this is going back to one of those techniques where you find your person. And also, what I want to mention here is as managers and owners as well, we can't carry all these things on our own sometimes. And actually getting together, forming a relationship with others in the same spot that we are in really helps. So a friend of mine started something years ago where groups of nurseries would just gather together, local groups, not in, originally they were a competition, but it's not a competition. We're serving, the children of our area. So we'd get together, some people who led nurseries in our own area, and we'd just get together informally, we'd have a cup of tea and a piece of cake, talk about how our industry was going, what was the biggest worry at the moment, how could we help each other, and also we created a bank of bank staff workers so that we could share bank staff you know, because going for, especially for small settings, going to hire bank staff members is very expensive. So we just look at ways in which as we could help each other within our own community. So we didn't have to carry it on our own. And I really encourage you to look at that. I know that there are network meetings and there's other things that you can do, but actually just looking at your community and carrying it together might be a new way of looking at things. So it might help to adjust your expectations, lower your expectations, in other words, often. Plan your day. Planning is a huge thing. We work with a lot of people who struggle with planning. And if you've got time control, a lot of the stress will just disappear. Call your support person. Be kind to yourself. You're doing an amazing job. And it's a job that is unlike any other. It's like 50, 100 things come into your brain at once every single day. And it's a unique job. Use the local services, use your local council services, any other services that are available. And this is where I've spoken about as well. Meet with other managers, build supportive relationships. And remember, it's not a competition between providers. As managers, it's not a competition. We are here to serve our community. Financial competition is something else, but let's try and keep that aspect out of it. Thank you, Gail. Right, so language is important. And when we're at work, we always send a message. Particularly as managers or leaders, we're sending a message to our staff. And as leaders, what we say affects our workplace. And I see this very often in my work. You've got to say, what are my team members hearing? And these are often the phrases. I'm so stressed. I cannot do this anymore. I simply cannot cope with the staff turnover, or not again. And I'm sure managers are looking at themselves now and saying, yeah, I do that. There's times where I just do that with anybody, not even with my closest team. So everybody on the floor knows how I'm feeling. And if I'm stressed, everybody's stressed. And then what we do, so that goes hand in hand. So what body language are we showing as we lead through these stressful times? We've got slumped shoulders, we roll our eyes when something happens, really frustrated looking, hopelessness, hands just thrown up in the air, can't deal with this anymore. Or just despair, sort of head bowed, head on the desk, and I've had my head on the desk a few times. But as it says in the bottom, you can be authentic and vulnerable, but you can be a positive role model for stress in the workplace. And looking at those things, hearing those, following those techniques that we talked about, linking with people, being kind to yourself, all of these things will help you to be authentic and vulnerable, but really be a positive role model. And in so doing, you can listen to others and say, yes, I understand your stress, and this is what I'm doing to help me. Thank you. Right, so signposting. This is something that we always speak about, but actually doesn't really happen on the floor a great deal. So it says here, for your setting, research local charities that can offer solutions to your community. Have information readily available for staff and parents. Now, when I say readily available, I really want to encourage you as settings to have these things readily available on a board, in a basket, whatever you want to do, for your staff and for your parents. For example, if somebody is wanting a food bank, often they feel ashamed, even if they're earning, better money than maybe somebody else in the setting. That doesn't matter. There's circumstances everywhere. The cost of living crisis is awful. Some people might want a food bank, but they don't necessarily want to tell you that. So have these available so that there's no embarrassment when people need to know about it. The same as debt relief. This CAP UK is a fantastic debt relief organisation that will alleviate financial stress almost overnight. I worked with them and I volunteered with them for a number of years, and they literally take over your finances. And they take your letters, your pile of unopened letters, and they open the letters for you, and they deal directly with the people. it's like a fairy godmother. And they give you a budget, they help you stick to the budget, they liaise with everybody that you owe money to. They are simply incredible. So if you've got any debt stress, I urge you to give them a call. Food banks, I've worked with some of those as well, and go and have a look and see. There's many options now for local food banks. We don't actually have to belong to a food bank, but they have places we can buy food for £2, £3, as many bags as you like. So do give those a check out in your local area. Mental health is a huge thing, and obviously being too stressed is part of mental health issues. But please speak about them with your people, with your managers, with your owners, with your person, and have this information available for people. Cancer support, this is a huge one at the moment. We get a lot of people, obviously, fighting cancer. When my son died of cancer, this was the best support that I came across. And, you know, some people might also feel a bit shy about asking for support in this area. They might be facing it as well, so have that available for them. Carer support as well, and parental support. Grief support is a huge one as well. This is one really good agency for grief support. But look in your local area, see what churches have got to offer in terms of grief support, what councils have got to offer. Any place you can find in your own community that does good grief support is something to have available, that information. So I would encourage you to do that. It will help us all through these stressful times. Thank you. So there's one final thought. And it's this. It says the greatest weapon against stress is our ability to choose one thought over another. So again, break it down. What is one thing you can do? Phone your person. Get your support. Be that support. Think, is it the most important thing right now? Is it that urgent? If it is that urgent, what can I do to make it better? And again, we're not in it alone. So do think about strengthening relationships with other settings, so that you can go through your stresses, with a job together. And then obviously anybody is welcome to contact me and have a chat. And other than that, Gail, I think it's over until the questions.
Thank you so much, Pam. That was amazing. Thank you so much. We've actually had quite a few questions in, and some people have put some in questions in the chat as well. And I know Gail's messaged me to say she's had some as well. Okay. One of the things we had was to ask, do you have any resources where you can share, that we can share with staff to support them with, for example, financial constraints? Because at the moment, finances, what we are finding is that the cost of living crisis is prevalent in our settings. So have you got any resources that you potentially have that you can share?
Yes, I have. But what I'll do is I'll put them all together and send them to you.
Brilliant.
Is that okay?
Yeah, of course. And we can include that into the presentation we can share afterwards.
Yes. And in fact, with that financial support, if you're in debt, certainly the cap is the best thing I've ever come across. It will immediately lift financial stress and will help you going forward, because it will equip you as to how to deal with it going forward. And cost of living, the same thing. And really, I'd encourage people to look at their local sort of reference points for places you can go shopping for very little, etc., because they are amazing. I know just up the road, one of my family members uses one, and you can go in and get beautiful food, from prawns to steak to potatoes. With as much as you've got, you can have £2 and get 6 bags full of stuff. Wow. So there are things around. Churches are another good place to look for that, because they do supply in various ways. But I can put that together as well in terms of, broadly speaking, what you would look at.
Oh, bless you. Thank you. I'm just going to put into the chat just on that topic. On the Parental website, I've just shared the link, there's a blog, and it's got over 2,500 blogs. That a lot of that is a search function. You can search relevant topics about stress, and a lot of, well, all Pam's articles that she's written about bereavement, which I know is one of the questions we've had as well, about losing staff members, supporting children with bereavement, anything like that is also on the blog. You can just search for those keywords, and you can find all those articles. Like I said, there is 2,500 blogs on there for you to be able to support you guys' settings.
Wonderful.
Lorna asked, she asked for the link for the bereavement. Yes, Lorna, so that is in there, which we will share with you guys. And Linda, sorry if I'm pronouncing your name wrong. You asked, getting staff to cover a ratio has been difficult, and that's obviously caused stress. Have you got any potential suggestions on that one? I know you mentioned bank staff already in your presentation, Pam, but anything else you can share on that topic?
I do know how stressful that is. It is probably one of the biggest stresses, actually, to find suitable bank staff that can jump in when you need them. As I said, the one good thing is if you liaise with other settings in your area, create a bank staff pool for 3 or 4 nurseries. One person can run it, they can do it all online where they can book each other. That, I think, is the most practical suggestion, where you don't have to pay an agency and you would get regular people within your place. And I would also go for a drive to look for more bank staff members, using social media, using all kinds of things that we've got available for us now, asking for people who've got experience or want experience to come forward, because there's still people looking for work. There are still people, available for jobs, and they might not have even heard of bank staff that could suit them. So think outside the box, I think, is the way to go. And certainly supporting each other, because sharing resources will help you as an industry, within your area.
Brilliant, thank you. Ruth has just mentioned, she said you mentioned coaching. How does that work? Obviously, Pam is a coach, but I'm sure, Pam, you can probably explain it a lot better than me. And just also for Judy's benefit, Pam's details will be shared with the presentation. We can contact Pamela afterwards, and she can explain a bit more about her services that she offers as a coach. But Pam, do you want to elaborate a bit more? Probably a lot more eloquent than me on that one.
Coaching is very simple. It's really forming a relationship with the person, chatting with them, talking with them in such a way that they are able to come to their own conclusions. Everybody's got their own answers within. Even though it seems like sometimes we just do not know what to do, what the answers are, they are all within us. And just through good questioning and exploration, we can come up to action points that actually make things work. It's very practical. There's very little fluffy about it. One can think of coaches that are very fluffy and it's all about how you feel, but that is important, but also you come to solutions as to what you can do to make the situation better. And it's all based on questions, listening, being heard, sharing your thoughts, and coming to conclusions that you can cope with, that you can handle, and that will yield results. And it's a tremendously powerful process. Coaches don't tell people what to do, which you'll be pleased to know. You come to your own solutions, but with guidance.
Thank you so much. One of the questions we had is, do you have any tips that we can use to support young people coming into the sector who often feels very overwhelmed? They're not used to having a lot of young kids screaming around them. And there's a lot of pressure as well to perform as a first job a lot of the time. What suggestions do you think that could be put in place?
Yes, I think it's a huge thing for young people to come in to work 35 to 40 hours off the bat in this kind of environment when they're still developing themselves. A lot of young people don't seem to have the resilience that is needed. So I think one of the important things to focus on is building that resilience. And you can do that in various ways. And I think one of the ways is to be a really open, supportive relationship as a manager or a leader, regular check-ins with them, all this information that we talked about on hand, but also pacing them. I think, you know, maybe they need an extra break here or there. Maybe they need a mentor to stand with them, or a buddy to share their jobs with. There are many things you can do to make their job easier, not to put too many expectations on them. I know there's a lot of people now hiring apprentices or young people and then giving them key children, for example, within the first month. That's not fair on them. They need to learn slowly, and they need to learn by doing. But we cannot put too high an expectation on them. But regular check-ins, regular supporting, providing a mentor to that person is really important, I think. Does that answer a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, just on my side, I am a real advocate of mentoring. I think it adds so much value.
Yeah.
And that support mechanism that's in place, because sometimes a manager just doesn't have the time between trying to cover ratios, trying to run the settings, trying to do parent complaints, whatever the scenarios are.
Yeah.
So that the young person in settings, we've seen significant benefits for that, and how learners have even progressed from parenta with having that mentors in place. So yeah, definitely. Thank you so much for that. I know Gail is itching to ask some questions. Sorry, Pam, did I interrupt?
No, that's fine. No, go ahead. Yeah.
Gail, I know you've got loads of questions, so go for it.
I've got 2 or 3 that have just come into me actually. Pam, you mentioned earlier about the collaboration that you did locally, I know in Brighton and Hove. A question's coming is, do you have any tips on how we could start a collaboration of nurseries in our area to share best practices, ideas, etc.? Where would we start?
I would start like we did, just emailing local nurseries, in a doable area, and saying we're having a meeting at such and such a place. It's an informal one, but we're just gathering together to see what we could possibly do in terms of supporting each other and supporting our community. See who pitches up. Have a lovely setting of tea and coffee and everything, and then just share without agenda, without that competition. Just share, and then from that you will find that there might be 2, there might be 3, there might be 5, however many will want to continually meet. So you would have a meeting once every 2 months or something, not onerous, so that you're not impinging on time, just to get together and talk about things. Creating that bank staff pool, maybe, if that's something you want to do. If there's a new thing from Ofsted coming, a new revelation of what we should be doing, we would talk about that and how that would impact and how we could teach that. So topics will just arise as to where you are and what is happening, and you just keep those meetings going. Have an email, WhatsApp group, whatever you want, just so that you build relationship. It's so much about building relationship and being there just to support and to blow off steam sometimes, because it's very lonely being a manager. It really is. And it gives you that chance just to let loose. So start just by emailing, creating a time and a place for a first meeting, and then discussing together, how do you want to go from there?
Great advice. Thanks, Pam. We've had a few comments come in. Karen Norman says step change are also brilliant in helping you deal with debt. She had to leave, so she said, thank you, very interesting webinar. It's definitely given us some things to try. So I'll add step change into the
I have heard of them. Yeah, great.
I've added one in myself, which somebody else told us about on a previous webinar called Your Local Pantry. That's another food one. So apparently that's a really good one as well.
Yeah.
And Rachel Glover says the bread and butter scheme is being offered in the Northwest.
Okay.
Perhaps different regions have different names for things, but I guess the best way is to perhaps do a search online for local help and assistance. But we've had so many lovely comments in the chat box. I expect you can see those. Thank you. What a lovely person to spend an hour with. That's lovely. That's Judy Hindbens.
Thank you.
I don't have any more questions. Adele, do you have any more?
No, not from my side. I mean, if anybody would like to take themselves off mute and would like to ask Pam a question, that's fine. We've got a few more minutes before we close up.
Got a quick question. We have some 2 children, siblings within our setting, whose parent is suffering from a terminal illness at the moment. We're not sure how aware the children are of the situation, but obviously when the time comes, have you got any advice on good companies to contact to help us with the children when they're going through that time?
Is that Yvonne?
It's Kirsty. I work with Yvonne
Kirsty.
in the office. Hi.
Okay, hello. What area are you in?
We're in Warwickshire.
Okay. I can have a mosey around, and if you contact me, my details will be there.
Thank you.
I can have a look at that. You know, there's broad companies that would help, but it'd be lovely to find somebody really local that would help.
And also with staff, because obviously the staff are do get very close to parents as well. So obviously when the time comes, it's how we can support the staff through that as well.
Okay. It might help just to, I've done 3 articles on grief within the workplace with Parenta. So have a look through that. And if there's anything you want to chat to me about in that regard, please do, because it gives some techniques and tips on how to deal with that situation.
That's wonderful. Thank you very much, Pam. Much appreciated. Thank you.
Yeah, Yvonne, we will share those articles in the presentation we'll be sharing afterwards, and we'll send out a post-webinar email to everybody who has registered, which I think today we were over 150 people have registered for this webinar today, so that's fantastic. And you know, I know it's difficult for people to take time out of the setting, so thank you for joining us today. Just to make everybody aware, we have a really big webinar next month where we've got Early Years Alliance in there, we've got NDNA, we've got a very big panel of industry experts to talk to us, to help us about the staff shortages, about the funding gaps that's in there. So together, hopefully we can come to some conclusions, see how we can make a difference, standing united to be able to support settings and basically have a reward for all the amazing work that people are doing in this in the settings, and supporting people, and the young people within our care. So do join us, sign up. The webinar is available to register now for the 9th of March. So please do come and join us, have your voice heard, have your say, and like I say, hopefully together we can make a difference. But Pam, again, from my side and from Parenta and everybody else who's joined us today, you have been fantastic. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Have a nice day, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.